Welcome to Dental Business RX. Practice success in 30 minutes or less.
Thank you for calling ABC Dental.
I get a considerable number of questions regarding the various subjects that we've brought up on prior episodes of Dental Business RX. And while I normally try to answer these questions individually, I've noticed a lot of them are questions that I've been asked off and on over the years, or variations of that. And they're really good questions. They're more or less universally applicable to a lot of different points of practice management. So I wanted to do a Q&A show, and I initially thought I would do one with all the listener questions I'd had, but that would be a long show. So what I decided to do was break down by subject the various questions I was getting, and I wanted to do shows about them. So I decided the first area I was going to pick was the area I had the most questions about, which was treatment presentations, treatment acceptance, sales, whatever you want to call it. So what I did is I took the various questions I received from you, our listeners, and in certain cases I might have had the same question asked 5 different ways, and I sort of amalgamated it into one question. And I got my list here, and I figured I would just do a free-form Q&A, listener Q&A, to answer the most common questions that I'm getting. So that's what this week's episode's about. It's a Q&A, listener Q&A on case acceptance and treatment acceptance. My name is Jeff Bloomberg, and I'm your host. And I've never done a Q&A show, so I don't know if I'm supposed to intro it a certain way. I'm just going to jump right in. I'm going to start. I have 7 questions that I whittled it down to, which I got the most of, and I thought that would fit within our episode parameters. So I'll just start with question number 1. All right, so here it is. It's, what would you do if you've explained a treatment plan to a patient, answered all of their questions, and then they say, I want to think about it, or I'll let you know? All right, so let's look at how this scenario might work. And because this may not always be happening to the doctor. In a lot of cases, if you're not going into the fee discussion with patients, which I'm also going to address here, you may have gotten to the point where you've explained the treatment plan, you've asked the patient if they have any questions, and then you send them off with your treatment coordinator or to go see the front desk to figure out how to pay for the treatment plan, in which case they're telling the front desk, I want to think about it, or I'll let you know, and you're finding out at the end of the day. Let's say they've said it to you, the doctor, or if you're a treatment coordinator, you could apply this same concept, although the doctor is going to have to get involved back in the conversation, and I'll explain why. So you've just told somebody, here's what it is. Let's say you've explained the fee, and they say, that's nice. I'll let you know. So what does that mean? What does I want to think about it, or I'll let you know mean? Essentially, what it means is no. Let's think about this for a second. If I tell you I want to think about it, what does that even mean? No one really thinks about anything. I'm not going to go home and sit at my dining room table with your treatment plan on my table and wrestle over whether I should do it or not. What it means is I'm not closed on doing the treatment. So essentially, it's a nice way of saying no. It's a far less confrontational way of saying no. So what that tells you is a couple of things. Number one, it tells you that you need to go back into, there's some consideration or thought this patient has that you have not fully addressed. They haven't fully understood the importance of the treatment, or their attention is on something else. So for example, you've just explained, let's say, I don't know, let's just use for this Q&A, we'll say it's not a huge treatment plan, but let's say it's 6 crowns, right? It's 6 crowns. Let's say your fee for a crown is $1,400. So this is I'll get my mouth working here, about an $8,400 treatment plan. So you've explained it to patient Joe, and then they say, thank you, doctor. You know what? I'm going to think about this for a bit. Now, I've been asked, what would I do if somebody said that? Well, normally what I would do is the first thing I would do with any objection, and this is important because there's different types of objections, is I'm first not going to get upset. I'm not going to get flustered. Even if I'm not visibly upset, I'm not going to get upset inside, because this is all part of the sales process. And I know this happens to people. You think you're doing a good job. You've explained it well. If you were the patient, you would just go ahead and accept it. And then they throw something out like, I want to think about it, or I have to go on a cruise, or whatever it is. And then you sort of just go, what's wrong with this person? Well, number one, don't think that people can't see that. Maybe they can't see it visibly, but they can feel it. All right, so the first thing you don't want to do is change your demeanor in any way. Objections are part of the sales process. I guarantee you, whenever you've bought anything or you've been sold something, you've had objections. If the salesperson got irked or annoyed or irritated every time you brought up an objection, chances are you didn't buy from them. So that's the first thing I would tell you to avoid doing. Be willing to hear objections. They're part of the process. It's not a big deal. So someone says they want to think about it to me. First thing I would do is I let them know I received that objection, and that's okay. I understand. That's the first thing I'm going to do. Totally get it. Now, I might go a couple different ways at that point, depending on what I'm seeing with the person in front of me. One thing I might do is think, well, they just don't get it yet. They don't get the importance of why it is that they need this. And then I would just kind of draw them back to the treatment plan itself, totally understand. Now, let me show you one other thing about this treatment and really why I want to do it now versus waiting, and just go right back into it. You could do that if you think maybe they just haven't gotten it yet. If you say something like, well, do you have any questions? They're probably going to say no, so I wouldn't do that. But the other thing I might do, let's say the person says they want to think about it to me, and I see that they seem to have their attention on something else. Maybe they're scared of drills and needles, or maybe they're concerned about the price, or whatever it is. I might say something like, well, listen, I'm just gonna let me level with you here, because the most important thing to me is your health. All right, and this is why I'm recommending that this is the treatment that you need. This is what I see is going to fully restore your health, or whatever it is that you're doing with them. And I would say, I've been doing this a while. Whenever I've had a patient tell me they want to think about it, usually what their attention is something else. They're concerned about the price, or they're concerned about getting a shot, or various things. So what is it that you're really concerned about here? It's totally okay to tell me. I just want to know. Because again, whether you do this now, never, or later is up to you, but what's important to me is that we restore your health. The idea is I'm trying to establish better communication with this person, and I want them to tell me what's on their mind. Maybe they're scared of drills and needles. I just hate getting shots, and I'm worried about being in pain. Well, then you can address that issue and kind of get your sale back on track at that point. So I'm going to find out what it is that's bugging them. So it's one of those two things. It's either I haven't fully handled it so that they understand what they need and why they need it, or their attention is on something else and I haven't fully addressed that. Which, let's just take a look at something with relation to objections just in general, because you hear the usual, I want to think about it, I can't afford it, this, that, the other. There's a distinct difference in different types of objections. Now, I want to just point this out. There's, a real objection as opposed to what we might call a faulty objection. All right? What's a real objection? A real objection, number one, sounds real. It sounds, that this could actually be the case, and the person tends to stick to it. So you've explained a treatment plan to me, and I say, listen, this sounds great. I'm going to speak to my wife about it. All right. I'm going to address that a little bit later as far as what you do when that comes up, but let's say I say that to you. You go, that's cool, Jeff. Understood. Well, what do you think she'd say? She's probably going to tell me to do it, but, we made an agreement years ago that I would not spend over $1,000 without talking to her. Well, what would happen if you just went ahead and did it? I'd be sleeping outside, doctor, so I don't think that's a good idea, right? So you notice how I'm sticking to this objection? Not changing it. I'm just sticking to it, and it's plausible. What if you tell me, let's take the same scenario, and you've told me this is what I need, and I say, wow, that's $10,000, let's say, or let's go back to our treatment plan we're using, $8,400. Yeah, doc, I really do want to do this. Here's the problem. I'm refinancing number one, I don't have the cash, and I'm refinancing my house right now, so I was told I can't apply for credit. Now, I could give you $500 down, but our refi is not going to be done for 3 weeks. After the refi is done, I'm more than happy to do financing to pay for this. Okay, so that sounds pretty real, doesn't it? That doesn't sound like I'm, putting you off there. I'm actually being very communicative about what's going on. Do you notice that? As opposed to just saying, oh, I can't afford that, or that's a lot of money. Being very specific. So the chances are in those cases, this is a real objection, and this is something that you have to consider and figure out what we're going to do. I'll talk about what to do with the wife situation in a minute. With the refi situation, you might have to just wait till they refi. I mean, they want to put a deposit down in that case, so not bad, right? So there's real objections. Then there's just objections that people have as sort of a normal part of sales resistance, right? We all have them. Oh, let me think about it, or I don't really have the time right now, or I'm really busy, or, that's a lot of money. Well, so let's say you've explained what I need, and I say, yeah, I really need to think about this. And you go, sounds great, Jeff. And look, I understand this is a big decision that you have to make. And then you go, but let me point out one other thing about what's happening in your mouth here or with this treatment. I'm going to show you in the x-rays, and I want to show you how we're going to handle this. And then you show that to me. And then I don't say I want to think about it again. Instead, I come back with, yeah, I'm really busy though. I don't know when I'd be able to schedule time to come in because I have to come in for the appointment to do the treatment. And then I have to have you put the final ones in. In other words, you notice I've changed my objection now. I've gone from, I want to think about it to, I'm really busy. And then you talk to me a little bit more, right? And then I come out with, yeah, and it's a lot of money. I keep changing, almost like changing channels. And I'm being very non-specific. In those cases, this is just basic sales resistance. We all have it, all right? Some more than others, all right? So in those cases, what would I do? I would just keep communicating with the patient. If there's a real thought or consideration or worry that I haven't necessarily discovered yet, I'd maybe ask about that. But for the most part, I'm just going to go back to why they need the treatment. And that's sort of, we brought this up in prior episodes when I had Sabri on, we were talking about the financial discussion. If the money discussion starts to get in trouble, you're back and forth on the money, drop the money discussion for a section because the person is not closed on doing the treatment. The most important thing is the person wants it. They're excited about doing it because then they'll figure out how to pay for it. You've probably had this happen to you before where you have somebody who you thought could never afford a treatment plan. And because they were just pumped about doing it, they figured out a way to do it. So their excitement, their desire, those are important issues when it comes to doing it. And so in those cases, if I have somebody who's just throwing one objection after the other, that just sounds like a little bit of a faulty objection. I'm going to keep talking to them so that they understand what it is, why they need it, what it is, why it's important, and that they actually want it. All right. That's question one. Let's go on to question two. Any tips on how to get a patient off of, or handle rather, I only want to do what insurance covers? All right, so let's look at where that normally comes up. That may come up again with the doctor, or it may come up with the treatment coordinator. So the main issue with this is, again, let's take that $8,400 crown situation that I described earlier. Let's say that's me, and I have $1,500 in dental insurance coverage. So you've gotten to the end of the presentation, and either from you or your treatment coordinator, I find out that this treatment plan is $8,400, and I only have $1,500 in insurance, and I know that it's only going to pay 50% towards crowns. So I go, well, gee, I'd like to not pay more than what my insurance covers. How much of this is my insurance going to cover? And we do the math, and we realize that I'm going to get some benefit on mostly 2 crowns. I might get a little bit of benefit on that 3rd crown, but for the most part, I'm just going to get benefit for 2 crowns, right? So in that case, I go, okay, well, I need 6. Can't I just do the 2 now? I only want to do what insurance covers. Now, part of the problem is you may have set this precedent in the past, which I also want to talk about, where you phase treatment for no good reason other than the patient wanted to do what insurance covers. So if you've set this precedent with a patient, sometimes it's hard to get them off of it because you've done it before, right? But you can always change, and you can always change these patients, but definitely you can change with new patients. It's not a good precedent in the long run because the whole idea of, what insurance covers or doesn't cover, what does it matter? What the insurance covers and doesn't cover really has nothing to do with what treatment the patient actually needs and when they need it. Because those are questions for you, the doctor. You're the doctor. You're supposed to be handling your patients. What benefits I have are really immaterial. It's what do I need and what is it and when do I need it? And that's where I think things have gone a little off the rails over the years in the profession is you get into this frame of mind, well, it's only going to cover amalgams on this case. Even though I hate doing amalgam, I'm going to do amalgam. Well, why do that? Because then you're just sort of killing yourself inside a little bit every time that you do that. It's just not a good way to operate. So what would you do with that in those cases with a patient? I mean, I wouldn't go off on a whole diatribe on the insurance company. That doesn't make sense. First thing you have to know is, from a clinical perspective, not what could you get away with, but what is it you want to do from a clinical perspective? What is best for this patient? Because most people can agree. Like they're there for themselves. They're there to get benefit for themselves, your patients. So if that's where your attention is on how you're going to benefit them, usually things work out pretty well because you're both on the same page. All right. So you're laying out, this is the treatment plan. This is what it is. I only do what insurance covers. Totally understand. Now here's the problem. I need to do these 6 now. And let me explain to you why. I'm concerned about these 4 teeth, or I'm concerned that if I don't get to these, and again, be truthful about this. If this isn't your actual, thought process on it, don't do this. But I'm going to get to these 4 teeth soon. I'm a bit worried we're going to end up needing a root canal on at least 3 of them. And do you see this tooth here? It has a broken cusp. Like I would just tell them, no, I want to do the 6 now, and here's why. The point being is, I understand you don't have coverage. It's unfortunate. It is what it is, but this is what you need. We'll work it out. There's different ways you can pay. That's not the big problem, but this is why we have to do the treatment. To me, that's just one other, I could run after that rabbit or it's like a dog running after a squirrel. I don't do what insurance covers. You get upset, even though maybe you don't show it to a patient. Now your attention is on how much you hate insurance companies. Forget it. It's the funny thing about dental insurance is it's not even really insurance in the strictest sense. If you have car insurance, why do you have it? Because then if you hit a pole, your insurance pays $250,000 to $500,000 in liability. You're transferring risk. It's the same thing with medical insurance. You break your back, you're transferring risk. You don't have to pay the $150,000 in medical bills. That's insurance. Dental insurance is not insurance, it's a benefit. And it's nice to have, and it's cool, but it should have zero bearing on your treatment plan. It's something that's kind of cool. Almost like when if you're a member of AAA or some, organization, you get like a coupon towards hotels or something like this. That, in my opinion, is essentially what dental insurance is. It's a benefit. It's cool to have. It's like a card point benefit of some kind. If you have an Amex, you get a travel benefit. That's really what this is. So I would not in any way let it guide your treatment planning process. Now, if a patient originates that, says, hey, I only do insurance covers, number one, remember what we do. We're willing to receive that objection. Okay, I understand. And we're not getting upset or changing our viewpoint. And just explain to them, yeah, you understand on the benefit. Now, let me explain to you why I want to do these now as opposed to waiting. If that really is your viewpoint. If it's not your viewpoint clinically, if you go, yeah, it doesn't matter whether I do half these crowns now and wait till next year, then fine. Do it that way. You have to do in your mind from a clinical perspective what is best for your patient. But one last thing I'd mention on this. The concern I have about phasing treatment, especially when it's not needed or you could have actually spoken to the patient and gotten them to understand why they shouldn't, is you're actually creating trust issues with patients at times by doing this. Let me explain why. So let's say you've presented to me that I need 6 crowns. I have insurance. It's going to pay $1,500. So then I say I only want to do what insurance covers. And then you don't really give any resistance. You look at it for a second, you say, well, they'd really only cover 2. And I go, good, then I want to do 2 this year. Can I do 2 this year and 2 next year and 2 the year after? Now, again, if from a clinical perspective, you think that's fine, then fine. But then why did you present all 6, right? Because here's what happens. You tell me, yeah, that's fine. We'll do the 2 this year, then 2 next year and 2 the year after. All right, so what does that tell me? Number one, it tells me that obviously these 6 crowns, these other 4 crowns that we're not doing, we're only doing 2 now. The other 4 that we're not doing, they weren't really that important. That's what that tells me. Yet you just told me they were, and now you're telling me they're not. It creates sort of a mixed message. So it makes me doubt you a little bit. And then don't be surprised if I then wonder, well, how important are the 2 crowns that I'm doing now? How important is this whole treatment plan? Do you see? So you create trust issues by doing it this way, because you're making me, you threw it out there. I need 6. Now I only need 2. Well, what do I really need, doctor? Especially if you don't really, if there's a situation where it just financially is undoable, there's no way the patient can do it, and you've gone back and forth, and this is the best that they can do right now, well, fine. Or if clinically in your estimation, you don't think you need to do all 6 right now, then tell them what they do need to do right now. That's the key. Again, you have to use your clinical judgment. I'm not you. I'm not a dentist. I'm not the one who's actually looking at a patient. Not that would matter. You get the idea, but don't just pop off of it because, insurance says this is what we're going to do. So, all right. So that's how I'd handle that one, or that's what we suggest to our clients to do. Let's go on to question number 3. You mentioned that the doctor should discuss fees. I have mentioned that, and finances. What would be the best thing to say here? I'm not completely comfortable discussing fees. And when would you mention the fee? All right, so there's a couple different ways this might happen, because how does it happen in the traditional office? The doctor explains the treatment plan, sometimes not, and then they go off with the treatment coordinator who goes over the fees, or they go to the front desk and they discuss fees. All right, so you have several different jobs in your office. If you own your practice, you have your owner job, you're an owner/executive, you're a salesperson, and you're a doctor. And you wear these different hats, per se, at different times. All right. So as the salesperson, your job, if you look at what is the expected outcome from a salesperson, is somebody who is paid up for and started on whatever it is that they're selling. It's not just getting them to pay, it's getting them to start it, to actually arrive for service. That's important. That's where the salesperson's job ends. Otherwise, a salesperson could take money all day and end up with a bunch of refunds. All right, so your job as a salesperson is to get people closed for treatment. So part of sales is figuring out financial agreements. Now, that doesn't mean you have to sit and grab credit cards and go run them or run a patient yourself through Care Credit or Lending Club or whatever financing you're using. But it does mean that you need to get the patient to the point where they understand the finances and are willing to proceed. So what would I expect? At minimum, what I would expect is, as the doctor, you would tell a patient how much their treatment plan is going to cost. Jeff, this treatment plan is going to cost $8,400. We expect insurance will pay $1,500. All right, and I go, well, how am I supposed to pay the balance? Now, if you're uncomfortable with this, you could then send me off with your treatment coordinator to discuss my financial options. That's sort of the bare minimum I would expect. You at least have to tell me the fee. I would expect you to go beyond that if you want to make sure that you have, you're actually getting these patients through their needed treatment, because that's really what this is all about, not getting the money, it's getting this treatment done. And I'll talk about that here in a second. But that's what I would expect, sort of as the bare minimum. You're going to tell me how much it costs. Now, let's say you're uncomfortable saying how much it costs. Well, then practice it. Sit down with your office manager or your dental assistant and just practice it. Don't look at the floor. Don't look at the treatment plan sheet or a piece of paper. Look them in the eyes and tell them how much it costs. Now, when would you do this? It really depends on that's sort of a personal choice. I've had clients who mention the cost early in the treatment plan presentation, or they may ballpark it, like this is going to cost about $10,000. I'll show you the facts and figures here in a second. And some wait till the end. There really is no right way as far as when you say it, but you have to say it. You don't have to do anything, but if you want to increase your close rate and your production and your collections and more patients getting through needed treatment, I would definitely recommend that you say it. Now, what point would I suggest you take it to? It might go something like this. I've practiced this in our seminars before with clients in the audience, and they go back and use it. It works great. So you tell me, well, Jeff, this treatment plan is going to cost about $8,400, as you can see on this sheet here, and your insurance, we're expecting about $1,500 from your insurance company. So then what do you say next? You could just stare at me at that point. I could stare at you. I might get upset. Who knows what I'm going to say? You just told me I got to give you $6,900. You might say something like, how would you normally pay for something like that? Or you might want to lay out what payment options you have for that balance. You could pay it this way. You could put a third down. You could finance it through this company. However you want to do it, right? You could just lay it out with me right there. But at minimum, what you might say is, well, how would you normally pay for something like this? So, Jeff, this treatment plan is $8,400. As you can see on this sheet, you should have a sheet that shows them this. This is the treatment. We're expecting your insurance to pay about $1,500. So your balance would be $6,900. So how would you normally take care of something like this? You don't have to say that right away, or you could wait for me to go, wow, that's expensive. Yeah, no, I understand. But how would you normally take care of something like this? And then I might say something like, well, could I do a payment plan? Could I put it on a credit card? Whatever way it comes to mind. Or I might go, I don't know. Well, then you could ask me again, well, yeah, no, I understand. But what would you normally do? Like, if this is what you were doing and you had to come up with an expense like this, what would you do? I don't know. I'd probably apply for financing. Now I'm going to answer you at some point. All right. So this is where I might take it a little bit further. So let's say I say to you, yeah, I'd probably want to do a payment plan of some kind. You could ask, well, how much could you pay per month? Because here's something else that's interesting. Let's say I could pay for it over 3 months. I could give you $2,300 a month. Why are you going to put me on 1-year financing with a 15% hit from a finance company? Why would you do that? You're just losing money that way. What could I do? See, what we're trying to do here is we're trying to get the patient involved in the process of solving this problem. You don't want to just solve it for them. And this is where things tend to go wrong. Because how does this normally go? They go to your treatment coordinator. Maybe you haven't mentioned how they pay for it. And then your treatment coordinator goes, oh, look, we have all these payment plans. And we could do this. We could do that. In other words, let me solve your problem for you. And then all of a sudden, the patient applies for financing and it gets disapproved. So essentially, I would want to find out, how does this person want to pay? How does this person want to pay? Well, could I put it on a credit card? Yeah, sure, you put it on a credit card. Could I do a payment plan and pay it off over a year? It's probably going to take me a few years to pay for something like this, because this is also telling you, you're going to do 1 year interest-free financing, or you're going to do longer-term financing that maybe has interest associated with it. If it's 5-6 years, you might use another finance company to put them on a payment plan where they're going to be paying some interest. Most people would expect to pay interest if it's going to be 5 or 6 years. But you want to get me involved in the process. So really simple. If you have trouble mentioning fees, practice it. Do it in the mirror. Do it with one of your staff until you feel completely comfortable with it. And you're going to mess it up when you do it with patients, and that's okay, right? And then if you want to take it, then send them off with your treatment coordinator. If you want to take it a step further, then you might lay out, here's the fee, and this is your portion. And how would you normally let me talk at that point? Wow, that's a lot of money. Yeah, it's pretty sizable, but we're doing a lot of work. How would you normally take care of something like this? Get me to start solving it with you. You'd be surprised how many people go, well, can I put it on a credit card? They have credit card access checks where they get 2 years of no interest. Have them write one of those. There's different ways to do this. And if you get them involved in the process, it helps. And the thing I like about this too is, because in a lot of cases, what might happen, especially with all of the patient financing options that are available today, there's tons. What can go wrong with that is if you just immediately throw that at somebody. So here's how much your balance is, Jeff, it's $6,900, and we can finance it through this company. So then you send me off. I get disapproved for that company. Now I'm just crushed. I'm not really excited about figuring out how to do this. And I tell you, I'm going to go home and I'll call you later. All right. The better bet is figure out how I would take care of it. And Sabri, when she was on the show talking about financial options, she had a great way of handling this, because you can tell them, look, why don't we take a look at different ways you could do it? Because, the thing with finance companies, I've seen people who get approved that I never thought would get approved. I've seen people get disapproved that I thought would never get disapproved. And obviously you would get a little bit of data about their credit worthiness before you go throwing them into a finance company. So let's take a look at a couple different ways so we have a bit of a plan A and a plan B. This way, if the finance company plan doesn't work out, you always have plan B at that point that you can go back to. Because again, why are we doing all of this, folks? We're doing it to deliver needed treatment to patients, not to get money. That's just part of the process. Getting the money is just as much as part of the process as getting them scheduled, as getting them to show up on time. It's just another step in the process. It's the economics of it. All right. So as far as one you mentioned, I think we addressed that, and there you go. The only other thing I would mention here, and this is important, is the sales process really begins during the examination. During your exam, you're going to want to sort of assess where your patient's frame of mind is. If let's say I just moved in from out of state, and I go, I want to get my teeth cleaned. I come in for an appointment, then you do an initial exam on me. And during the initial exam, I start telling you how, my last dentist, he said I was his star patient and I took great care of my teeth and blah, 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 right? Then during your exam, you notice there's a lot of problems, right? I'm going to need a lot of work. So obviously what you're finding and what I'm saying don't match. So if you don't give me some sort of a hint that this might be happening, when you finally lay out the treatment plan, it's going to be pretty rough. So if that's happening during your exam, what you might want to do at that point is start showing them things as you're going through it. Hey, did you notice this dark spot on the tooth over here? Have you ever noticed that before? Oh, no, I've never seen that. I don't look in that part of my mouth. Yeah, we need to take a look at what that is. And do you notice on this tooth here, it's actually missing one of the cusps? Yeah, I was wondering what was going on. I thought that was just how it was shaped. Like, you're showing them all of these things. So when you start telling them during the treatment plan presentation process that they need work, it's not going to come as out of left field like a complete shocker. All right? Okay, here's our next one. When I do a new patient exam on a patient that needs a lot of treatment, I'm hesitant to present it all at once. For instance, I might present the scaling/perio first and then discuss restorative procedures when they come in for a scaling appointment. What would you do in this situation? What would you recommend in this situation? Okay, so this is what I've heard off and on for years. And I've heard it in two different situations. Usually when it's a patient who is new to you. I've seen this with a doctor who takes over a practice. Let's say you've taken over a practice where there's a lot of work, which should be part of your due diligence anyway when you buy the office. And then you go in and you don't want to freak the patients out by dropping, you need all this work, and the prior doctor didn't say that to them. They were kind of keeping a lot of things on watch that maybe you wouldn't keep on watch. All right. Or you get a new patient who comes in and they don't really know you yet, and you don't want the first interaction with them to be this humongous, have this humongous price tag associated with it. So I want to just draw this back to the basic problem I have with this, which is if I have somebody and I've just met them and they need treatment X, Y, and Z, whether I tell them they only need X now or I tell them that they need X, Y, and Z now, they still need X, Y, and Z. So then why wouldn't I tell them what they need? I'm afraid that they're going to leave, that I'm going to lose the patient. I'm going to create bad PR in my community, whatever. It's born out of concern or fear. It's not born out of what is best for the patient. That is the problem I have with that. And again, I mentioned earlier how you can create trust issues with patients by, immediately jumping into what insurance will cover versus what you just recommended. This is another way you can create trust issues. So they come back for their perio appointment if they show up, and now you're telling them they need this. What are they going to find out next time they come in the office? Sort of like you're breaking it to them gently. They're coming to see you because you're a doctor. So I would tell a person what they needs. I would tell a person what they need, not what they needs. Sorry. But this considers that you have adequate time to explain what they need. So again, I've come into your office. Let's say new patients are seen in hygiene. You come in for the last 20 minutes of the appointment to do an initial examination. You see that I need $8,400 worth of treatment. You have 5 minutes left in the appointment. You're probably going to want to bring me back to explain what it is that I need. Because in 5 minutes, you're going to, that's another reason why this tends to happen. You're not going to have time to really explain why I need 6 crowns and why it's important and all of that type of thing and really answer my questions well. You're better off bringing me back for some form of a consultation, where you're going to explain this to me. And I've talked about this in other episodes before doing consultations. Now, if I had the opportunity, I'm a big believer in doing things now. If I can do it now, I'll do it now. If it can wait, if it has to wait, it has to wait. But if it needs to be done now, it's done now. So if you can present it now, you have time and I have time. That's important as the patient. If I don't have time to listen and whatever, I got to go to work, then don't start the treatment plan presentation. If you can't finish the presentation properly, don't start it. Bring me back. Now, the biggest concern usually with scheduling a consultation to bring me back is that I'm not going to show up for the consultation. So that tells you a couple things is, one, you want to bring them in quickly, the next day, the day after, and you want to get me on the schedule fast, and you don't want to tell me everything I need and then say, come back in so I can explain it to you. You need 6 crowns. I want to talk to you about it at a consultation appointment. I'm going to be on the internet pricing crowns in my area. I've just met you. I don't have any brand loyalty with you yet. So it might be, Jeff, I want to do a full report with you of what I found and explain what's going on. I usually do that during a consultation appointment. It takes about 20 minutes to a half an hour. I do them first thing in the morning and first thing after lunch. And I talked about in last week's episode why I do it that way, just because you can save days and things like this. I won't rehash it here. But you want to have time blocked out on your schedule for consultations. And again, by consultations, we're not just talking about FMRs and all on sixes, because in a lot of cases, a $8,000 case is a big decision for people. Even a $4,000 case is a big decision for people. You need to have sales time built into the schedule. But I wouldn't get into all the specifics. Now, what might happen when you're trying to bring me back for that consultation? I might say things like, well, can't you tell me what's going on, doctor? And then you might be tempted. Well, you need some work on this, that, the other. I would recommend against this. Again, you have to use your own judgment as the doctor and, based on what you're required to do and not required to do. I'm not familiar with every specific law everywhere on planet Earth, unfortunately. But I would prefer to bring them back just because it makes the most sense. And in those cases, you could say, no, you know what? I want to make sure that I have time to fully review your case. Like, this is kind of a big deal. You're making time to talk to this person. I want to make sure we do this right. I want to study everything, make sure that I have it all worked out. And then I can lay out to you exactly what's going on and answer all of your questions. Most people are going to respect that. And then you can tell them, I do the consults in the morning. When's my next morning appointment? You could ask the hygienist. 9 o'clock day after tomorrow, doctor. Could you be here 9 o'clock, Jeff? Day after tomorrow? Yeah, sure. Sounds good. Bring me back, I guess, is the point. But I'm not a huge fan of not telling somebody what they need. I think it's, It's born out of fear. It's not a good idea. It's not a successful process. If I have a client come to me and let's say, because we do a lot of different types of training here, but for the most part, we start with usually marketing training if the person's having trouble with new patients. Then we do sales training because, you need to increase your treatment acceptance and that'll increase your collections as well as, patient satisfaction, career satisfaction. And then we do organizational training. Normally, organizational training is not needed unless you have something to actually organize. Collectively, we call this the MGE Power Program. And I'll put a link to this, all of these, the sales training, the new patient workshop, and the Power Program in the description. But if I talk to somebody, and let's say they're doing $250,000 a month, they're having staff problems, the office is disorganized, they're losing at least $100,000 a month. If they were to capitalize on a couple of opportunities, their revenues would go up $100,000 a month immediately, and they're wasting money. And they go, Jeff, can you help me solve this problem? Oh, well, they need our Power Program. So our Power Program is extensive. It's 78 days long. It's also not cheap. So I'm going to tell them they need the Power Program. Now, I might say, you need the Power Program. It costs this much. It's going to take this many days to do, etc. And this is the results. I think the average increase from off the top of my head, it's 232% after sustained after 5 years, right? Now, let's say I say that to somebody and they look at the price tag or the amount of time it's going to take to do it, and they're a bit freaked out. It's going to take a lot of work and they're not quite ready to make that commitment yet. Maybe they want to see if what I'm recommending initially works. Then fine. Good. Then what I'll do, I'm comfortable starting you here. You're going to do the sales training first. But then they're not under any impression that the sales training is going to solve all their organizational problems. I haven't given them a false picture as to what's actually going on. I guess sort of the moral of all this is just level with people. Because here's the truth. Some people, no matter what you do and who you are or what you say, are going to give you a hard time. It's just the nature of the game. Some people are going to make you wrong and tell you're a bad person or whatever. Does not matter. You could be feeding starving puppies. It doesn't matter. There's a small percentage of people who are going to just give you a hard time no matter what you do. But you want to focus on the majority of people who are appreciative. Why would I focus on the people who are a problem? I'm going to focus on the appreciative people, knowing that I'm going to run into problematic people from time to time, and that's fine. I'm not going to change my life or the way I operate because of those problematic people. Okay, so last couple points here I wanted to hit before we end it off. I could go on with this for a while, and I did pare these questions down, but I'll do my best. All right, so when should the treatment coordinator be in the room with me during a treatment presentation? We've talked about that before. I think ideally they're there for the whole thing because then they've seen how you've handled various objections, so if the patient brings it up with them, they can address them. If it's a $2,500 case with a patient of record and it's really not that big of a deal, you can walk them over to the treatment coordinator. They don't have to be there the whole time. It's really a matter of how trained your treatment coordinator is, how good of a rapport you have with them, and obviously making sure that you fully turn over whatever was discussed with the patient. Because where this can go wrong is you've left the room now and the treatment coordinator wasn't there when you were handling all these questions the patient had, and then they're bringing them up again, and now you're in with another patient, and they have to come get you. And let me just say this is going to happen. You're going to have cases where it goes to the treatment coordinator, and technically, let's take that example from earlier. I need 6 crowns. I tell you I'm going to do them. I go to your treatment coordinator, and I go, I only want to do what insurance covers. What is that, 2? I want to do 2 now then. Well, the treatment coordinator cannot make that call. They're not going to tell me which 2 crowns I can do. That's a doctor decision. So ideally, they could come get you. Let's say you're in the middle of a root canal. Well, then they can't come get you. So then what do? I've had people ask, should I have the patient wait? I mean, if you're going to be available in 5 minutes, sure. But if you're not going to be available for 40, you're going to probably have to schedule this patient to come back, or you're going to have to call the patient. And I guess what it comes down to is in certain cases, you're going to not close some people, folks. You're not going to close everybody. But, if you're closing 20 to 30% of full treatment plans now and you get that up to 50, that's a humongous difference. It's like when we talk about new patients. I've talked about this extensively, how, the average conversion rate in the U.S. is 23% of incoming new patient phone calls. So at 100 calls, 23 people actually schedule. That's terrible. So someone could look at that and go, well, I want to get that to 100. And it's just failure unless we're at 100. I think that's a bad viewpoint. If I can get it to 50 from 23, that's a big win. If that's 100 phone calls and I go from 23% converted, which is 23 patients, to 50 by just, improving my reception, That's 27 more new patients. I've doubled my new patients. That's awesome. And then if I can get it to 60, focus on the positive here, folks. If you can increase your close rate, you start increasing your close rate, that's a win, and you can always get better. You're always going to be able to improve the more and more training and experience that you have. So, as far as when the treatment coordinator should be in the room, again, back to training, experience, etc. Maybe with a smaller case, you don't have to do that. With a bigger case, ideally, they're there in the whole time because then they can hear, the various things that you handled. And you're not going to close everybody. It's just the way it is. So you know what you do? You make sure you get them back on the recall schedule so that you can see them next time and talk to them. But do your best. All right? All right, last question. You've explained a treatment plan to a patient and they tell you they need to speak to their spouse about it. And this sounds real, like the example I gave you earlier in the episode. Like, I have to talk to my wife, doctor. What do you do? Well, there's a couple things you can do. Really depends on whether you can get them back in soon with their spouse, because the big concern about this that I have is if I'm talking to somebody and they have to talk to their spouse about it, it really, again, depends on what the situation is. I might ask, well, what do you think he or she might say? And they go, oh, they'll be fine. I do this stuff all the time. Then fine, right? In other words, if they're comfortable just handling this on their own, fine. If they say, well, I have no clue that this is a lot of money, well, then I'm probably going to want to bring them back in with their spouse, because when they go home, that spouse didn't sit with me for a half hour while I explained all the treatment, but they're going to understand the fee because that's something that's universally understood. So I'm probably going to want to get them back with their spouse. And the plus on that is, let's say their spouse isn't a patient. Well, then I might get a new patient out of the deal. So again, it depends. If the spouse is accessible and you can bring them back soon, bring them back with their spouse. Well, you know what? Let's just do this, because you're going to go home. You're going to talk to your wife, Jeff, and she didn't sit here for a half hour and listen to everything we've gone over, and she may fixate on the price. I want her to understand why I want to do this with you. So I'm happy to sit down with you and explain this all over again. I might go, well, gee, doc, that sounds awesome. Let me call her and see when we can come in. Or I might tell you, doctor, it's fine. I just have to explain to her what I need to do. We just made an agreement. I have to tell her before I do it, in which case, fine, you're going to follow up. Let's say my spouse is in Europe and, they're not coming back for 3 months. Well, then, it might be one of these where this one might go sideways, folks. I might call my spouse. She says no, and I don't do it. Again, you're not going to close everybody. Just remember that, because if your benchmark is I have to close everybody, and I know that this happens because a lot of dentists are perfectionists, you're going to continuously be disappointed. We're looking for improvement. Okay, so I think that's all I have time for. I've blown the 30 minutes or less again here. I hope this helps. If you've enjoyed this show or you enjoy listening to the podcast, please take a minute and subscribe to or follow us on whatever podcast platform that you're listening to. Again, for questions, if you have questions for me, you can email me at jeffb@mgeonline.com or contact us, or the contact us form rather on the Dental Business RX website. I put links in the description to our new patient workshop, our sales and communication seminars, which is really where we go over this stuff in depth. This can make a huge difference in your practice. You can learn more about it there, as well as the Power Program, which I mentioned. And other than that, have a great week. Have a great week, and I will see you at the next episode.